And here we are at the springtime ending and summertime arriving. We celebrate the freedom of our country that we often take for granted. 247 years this experiment has lasted. And it leads us to the question, what does make us free? Sometimes our curiosity gets to us. Do you know what freedom really means? There are many people who are concerned that our children have no idea, not even a clue about July 4th. And worse, they don't know who we broke away from, and they don't want to know. Well, it's troubling when you realize what was required: the sacrifice, the courage, the vision, the resolve. Yes, we live in precarious times. And they signed the document for King George III, saying we want to govern ourselves. But we're living now in precarious times. And it's disconcerting that our children not only don't know much history, they don't want to know it. I was with, one of the members of this church. Took me around touring. And we got to a place, Ybor City, and there was all these young people. And I asked one of the young people, do you know who Bob Hope is? Nope. How about Johnny Carson? Nope. How about Bing Crosby? Nope. How about Rihanna? Yep. Well, this is another 4th of July. Well, their mother was very, very understanding. I know what you're meaning. Well, what are you going to do? We stand firm. We will not let ourselves be burdened ever again by the yoke of slavery. And in this prodigious moment, besides the parades and the barbecues and the celebrations, we ask the harder question as Unitarian Universalists. What is it that makes us free? Just because we live in a free country doesn't make us free. There's many people in this country who live in one form of bondage or another. Now, if you're a young person, sometimes, becoming an adult means freedom. Remember? When you said to your parents, when I become 18, I'm moving out and I'm going to live on my own. I'm going to do whatever I want. And I'm going to make all the decisions for my life. And I hate you. Slam the door. Most adults will tell young people they're not as free as they think they're free. They have simply exchanged one set of chains for another set. What is it that makes us free? Most of the people assert that we live in one form of bondage than another, yet they'd rather live here than anywhere else. It's understandable when you look at our experiment and how it's structured, and they allow for many of the privileges that support our citizens, where most countries in other parts of the world do not. There's a lot of reasons why people favor this country. And other than the mere fact that many of us conveniently were born here. I find it incredible. There are people in this country who were willing and still are willing to pay the ultimate sacrifice so that we could live in a nation that's free. I believe there are many reasons, 3 main reasons that I've come up with. And the way it's structured stands head and shoulders above other countries. This is not just a fabricated notion of freedom that we echo every July 4th. You take my freedom from me and you'll have to take my life from me as well. Many people say. So why do people feel so passionate about this one aspect of our nation? Why is freedom the core of the ingredient, the bedrock of what we stand on? Well, these 3 reasons we might point to share our understanding of what true freedom really is. One is nothing to hide. Nothing to hide. Have you ever gone through life with a secret that's so dark, rattling around in your conscience, you tried to sleep and you tried to live day after day, looking over your shoulders and thinking at any moment somebody's going to find out that secret and your life is going to be crushed. And your world as we know it will fall like a house of cards. Well, let me assure you, I can relate to this because I lived it for many decades. Oh, I don't need to go into specifics, but I lived with the secret of being gay for years and years. If the leaders of my denomination were to know that I was gay, I'd be summarily dismissed. I'd lose my pension. I would have no place to live, no family to care for, to support, to love. I remember that time as if it were yesterday. It's a terrible thing to go through life with a secret rattling around in your closet. To hide because of all that you do. You could lose so much. And there's no emotion that can enslave us quite like guilt. I had to listen to other insensitive people say gay jokes, and the only acceptable response to keep my cover was to laugh along and enjoy the prejudice and the bigotry. Imagine going all through your life hiding who you really are, or who you still are. Imagine people with more education than you have, with more standing in society than you have, telling you that homosexuality, the homosexual lifestyle, whatever they thought that was, is a choice that you can end. And if you choose not to be straight, charges would be brought against you at a church trial. Most assuredly, you'd be convicted by a kangaroo court. And everything about your career would be part of that trial. Your ordination, your service to the churches that you might have served over the years, all gone in a flash. All I got to say is it wasn't an easy time to live, for sure. Hiding. And then, there's that phrase that Janis Joplin said, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. Wow. Now, many of you know that I served as a chaplain in upstate New York. I learned a lot of things from that experience. You might say it's the classic words about nothing left to lose, nothing left to lose. Oh, inmates would tell me they committed such heinous crimes, nobody ever caught them. Now, how'd you get in prison then if nobody ever caught you? Well, they turned themselves in. Two fellas broke into the prison because they were hungry. They didn't have food and they didn't know where to sleep. So they broke into prison. Now, if they just kept their mouth shut and they were free and clear, you see, but their crime against other persons was so great, they couldn't live with themselves any longer. They just couldn't cover up and keep running into nothingness endlessly. These inmates felt any moment their case was going to be exposed, and their worst fears were reality. The media would say that man's case was a case of justice delayed, but not justice denied. Think about that. You could get away with a crime. All you have to do is have no guilty conscience and keep your mouth shut. Nobody knew that you were there. Nobody asked your name. Nobody even came up with you for one reason or another as the person who did it. But you walked into the police station. You said, I need to talk to a detective about a crime committed years ago, and I'm here to confess. I suppose it goes down to this. Although right now their bodies are in jail because they told the truth, there's now a new freedom in their souls. They no longer carry the burden of guilt and secrets. Nothing left to lose. I suppose that's the reason John Hancock wrote his name so large in the middle of that page of the Declaration of Independence. He wanted King George, who knew he had difficulty reading, to be able to read it without his glasses, the bold signature of John Hancock. Here was a man ready to fight for his freedom, to pay for his life for the freedom. If it became necessary, nothing left to lose. And I suppose if you go further into that interpretation, his decision to be the largest signature on the page, all the way from Hartford, Connecticut, is because there's some truth in the fact that many people are captive to their possessions. Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Well, she sang that. Without your freedom, you have no possessions. You have no life. Without your freedom, your priorities are all screwed up. Without your freedom, you're as good as being a dead person, walking around like a zombie. Freedom is something nobody can take from you in the United States of America. We cherish it, we nurture it, we embrace it, we protect it, we die for it, and now we live for it. And when the architects of that magnificent document drafted King George, the intent of our people to break away from Great Britain, they were saying nothing has more value than the ability to choose their own destiny. If war was inevitable to achieve that freedom, the people were here in the colonies were ready to go to war. And one aspect that most people don't really know about was that if we had lost that war to the Redcoats, all the people who signed that document were sure to hang by their neck. By the way, there was one woman who signed, the woman who made the documents, the Declaration of Independence. They were going to hang by their neck. They knew the stakes. They were willing to pay the price. Most of the signers of the Declaration of Independence died penniless anyway. A lot of them were broke. They died horrible deaths. Yes, our founding fathers, as we fondly refer to them, never actually met in Independence Hall for a group photo. Nope, never happened. Never happened. They scurried in under the protection of darkness at night for several days. One by one, ran as fast as they could to get away once they signed, because they knew if they were caught, they'd be killed. So this adds to the drama of their courageousness, to fight for their freedom and our audacity to hold it for 247 years. And I believe that all this effort to release themselves from bondage of an imperial king in Great Britain led them to one more aspect of why they signed and went to war in the first place. First, they had nothing to hide. Second, they had nothing to lose. And finally, it's in the front of your bulletin, they had nothing to fear. You remember Franklin Roosevelt's statement? January 20th, 1933. Now, the reason I mention that is they used to do it in March 4th. Then somebody said, wait a minute. We elect somebody in November all the way to March. That's too long. So they pushed it back a little bit. That was the first one. He said to a fearful nation, people who lost everything in the Depression, the collapse of Wall Street, the struggle of the First World War, we have nothing to fear. Yeah, there you go. All you have to do is read the front of your bulletin. Man. I'm just saying. What exactly did he mean by that? Good old FDR. Well, he conveyed to a nation that their resolve to be a free people would be overcome by any obstacle in their way, that they would survive and prosper yet again. The problems that the country would face would be dealt with, and the American people would live in a country they could be proud of once more and not be afraid. And our brand new 32nd president was right. I believe what FDR was trying to say in that inaugural address, you can't take away a man's dignity or a woman's maternal instinct to provide for their family. That's where Hoover missed the mark, in my opinion. He said, just hold on, it'll all right itself. He was right too, but he was not as sympathetic as FDR, who said, no, I'm going to use every resource to develop new programs, and I'm going to put people back to work. And technologically and economically and spiritually and patriotically and otherwise, that's exactly what he did with the WPA, with Social Security, etc. He felt nothing could stop us. Whether it was the Dust Bowl or the threats of the Japanese or the Germans or the economy or the recession that turned into the Depression, nothing, absolutely nothing could stop us. So we have nothing to be afraid of. We have nothing to fear but fear itself. And he was right. And of course, in the midst of our history, in this 247 years of an experiment of a hard-fought history, Unitarian Universalists have been at the forefront of creating that history, standing with people who are suffering, maybe dramatizing the evils of what it is to be enslaved. It's considered the darkest moment in the history of our country. And what was the Unitarian Universalist response to the darkness? Unitarian Universalists did not curse the darkness, they lit a candle. And as you know, the blazingly liberal minister that stands before you remembers one of his heroes this July 4th. I've got to mention him. Senator John McCain of Arizona was beaten, tortured, and given up for dead. 6 years in the Hanoi Hilton. He was even used by the North Vietnamese as propaganda, peace offering, if you will, an olive branch to the people of America. They proposed, we're going to release Lieutenant Commander John McCain after we beat him to almost near death, knowing that his father and grandfather were big mucky-muck admirals in the Navy. But Lieutenant Commander John McCain said, "No way, not without my men." Well, that single statement made him a hero to me, in my way of thinking. And I'm not going to accept any other description of him by anybody. I never voted for him. I didn't agree at all with his politics, but he was a hero to me because he thought of others before he thought of himself. And he endured 6 years of ruthless agony. He outlasted his abusers and would not compromise even an inch during his brutal time at the Hanoi Hilton. Well, it makes you ask, what do you do with people who won't be intimidated? What do you do with people who are so committed to a cause, the cause of freedom, that fear becomes inconsequential? That was the kind of man who signed the Declaration of Independence. That's the kind of man who developed the Works Progress Administration, FDR, and saved the free world through Lend-Lease programs for Great Britain. That's the kind of man, JFK, who got the missiles out of Cuba. That's the kind of man who stands up to his enemies and will only fight if the United States is in danger. And of course, I have to acquiesce to one of the greatest men of all, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was a man who had nothing to hide, and trust me, J. Edgar Hoover tried to find the dirt. Here was a man who had nothing to lose. What he preached, he lived. He was a man of great intellect, a man of fine education, and many talents, but he didn't take those offers for the cushy professorial positions of universities who were hungry to have him, because that would be away from segregation. He knew something all of us maybe didn't know. Our country was not free. And the disease of fear and prejudice and bigotry and racism was getting worse from every side. No, he didn't accommodate racism. He confronted it. And yes, by the time the movement finally arrived in Washington for that rally, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, August 27th, 1963, he declared, "This is not an end, but a beginning." 1963. There he was in the front of the Lincoln Memorial. How appropriate. Now, most people in leadership, like President John F. Kennedy and his cabinet and staff, discouraged Dr. King from holding the rally. Eventually, they reluctantly, cautiously approved it. All the people who spoke at the rally, all the people who were there, they were given 6 minutes to speak. Dr. King, who ultimately was one of the last speakers, he took 18 minutes. While Dr. King was speaking, a woman in the back. Her name was Mahalia Jackson, right? And she was, she just, like there's something about African-American people. They don't mince words. Martin, tell the people about the dream. Tell them about the dream, Martin. And he heard her several times say that. He looked over at her. And then he took off like a rocket. When Dr. King heard her say that, he seemed to take off and preach about his dream. So I say to you, my friends, that even though we must face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream, that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, that one day, right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. Every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places be made plain, and the crooked places be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is our faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we'll be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we'll be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day when all of God's children, black men and white men, will be able to sing with new meaning, "My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty. Of thee I sing, land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain in Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and every molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring. And when we allow freedom to ring, when we allow it to ring from every village and every hamlet and every city and every state, we'll be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men and Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholic, will be able to join hands to sing in the old Negro spiritual, "Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last." Amen.